You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hey Jake, I got to give you an A+ for patience. So
no worries.
Welcome into the Valley Current. I want to tell you a story about deciding to use an old Macintosh machine that I had in storage, and of course the microphone doesn't work with it. So luckily I had in the trunk of my car an old Logitech microphone, which I plugged in, and it still works. I'm shocked. I'm sitting here saying, man, it's just amazing when you have enough equipment, you can cobble stuff together and just make it work. And then the second innovation, which is going to lead to a business idea for you, is I found some stuff that you need to give out with your next promotional deck for Casetext. You give out these little cards and you say to people, you're spending so much time online, you need these little cards to like lift up to say, yes, let's get ready to get started. Plus, if you're a Facebook enthusiast, you could have one of these little cards too. There's a lot of them all over the place. And then this one, of course, for when the microphone doesn't work.
Hi, your audio isn't working.
I mean, we finally debugged all this equipment. I've got my beach wear on because we're out on the beach in quarantine here. Offices are still closed. You look like you're in your little attic space. Do I have that right?
That's right. We're on the upstairs of my house.
Well, that's great. You've got a nice little arrangement there. You've got like a set of books behind you, even though you're making books obsolete. Kind of a nice statement, right?
Yep. I mean, downstairs actually, just to the right of me is this kind of spiral staircase and even bigger kind of bookshelf.
Oh, I like this. So you're still a believer in books because as the CEO of Casetext, aren't you making them obsolete?
To some degree, yes. And the truth is that personally, I'd almost always rather read something online or on an e-reader than read it, in the kind of traditional book form. I think books are in every way less comfortable. You can't Ctrl F in a book, right, to find that passage you want to find. They're clunky. But maybe more importantly, I think the most important aspect of all, and you think about the kind of business that I run, is that it's not, without digitizing the information, without turning the text into information, you can't really do much with it. You can take it in, it's the most important kind of activity to do, but finding it, organizing it, putting it into somewhere useful, putting it into brief, et cetera, that becomes much harder. So in short, you're right, but still love books.
Right. I mean, years ago, you couldn't have a law firm without having a library, and you couldn't have a library without having an office, and you really couldn't have an office without having some money for a deposit. So starting a law firm was far harder back then than today. I think people just get a laptop and an internet account, and they're off to the races with a Gmail account and a Google website, right?
I think the truth is the same for startups. It used to be that just to get off the ground, you may have to have your own servers at the beginning of the day and know how to operate them. So you have to have a person to operate the servers. You may have to have a local install with an Oracle database to have and as the open source movement evolved, and as a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the most difficult aspects of running a website were kind of compartmentalized and outsourced, that put, I read this article once. The upshot of it was, someday in the not too distant future, there will be a single individual who runs a business that's valued at $1 billion, right?
Well, I think that guy that ran Plenty of Fish got pretty close to that.
Yeah, that's a good example. There was a
guy who was like a sole founder, and he ran everything off of like one machine and one server, and he was competing against Match.com and a bunch of others. And people said, "Well, why don't you hire people?" And he says, "I don't need them. I can do it all on my own." I think he sold his business for pretty close to $1 billion. We should have him on the show and interview him, because he had that mentality of, I have a unicorn and I do it right out of like one room. I don't even think he owned a piece of property. I think he rented space.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible, right?
It's a good story.
Instagram was 10 people when it sold for $1 billion.
Right.
The barriers to entry to starting something valuable, whether it be a law firm or a startup, have gone down. But I think it's as hard as ever to run a successful one, because that's true of everybody else.
Right.
And so I think marketing gets harder and marketing costs go up. Kind of attention in the marketplace gets harder. I know a lot of law firms and lawyers these days, their problems have shifted from how do I get started to how do I get clients, right? How do I maintain those clients? How do I charge a rate that makes sense, but for the client's perspective, but also I can eat, And I think those are the kind of interesting questions these days.
Oh, I have to tell you, I've been listening now to the Supreme Court on C-SPAN in the morning, and people are like, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Do you know how good and also bad the advocacy is, and how much you learn about what these very high-priced lawyers? I mean, these guys are getting close to $2,000 an hour, and of course they put in 1,000 hours for every 10-minute argument or 15-minute argument they make. So the cost of that appeal is pretty high." And sometimes it's not that good, even in the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, so far, actually, the advocacy has been pretty good, and the Chief Justice is doing a great job kind of running the show. But Clarence Thomas is kind of like asking questions now, and people haven't heard from him for like 10 years. They thought his tongue was cut out or something.
It's a sign of the apocalypse.
Yes,
it's
yet
another
something that's really happening here.
Yeah.
So tell me more about your journey, because I picked up with you, and I think you were just graduating from Stanford Law School and had the idea for Casetext. And I, like an idiot, I didn't invest. I think I saw your business plan, and I thought, man, you're going after some big incumbents here, and you've made a great success out of it. So tell us, like, how did you decide to A, go into law school, and then B, decide, hey, I'm just going to start a business right out of law school?
Well, actually, I started after practicing for a bit. So there's a bit of a gap there. But going back to the beginning, I grew up around here in Silicon Valley, and my dad started a company in our garage. And this is in 92 or 93, like really, really early on. I remember when they applied for a kind of a business name in Delaware, they somehow figured out that they were the first ever business with the word internet in the title.
Okay.
Because that's how kind of early they were. And they called it Internet Business Systems because they didn't know what they were going to do. And the acronym IBS, I don't know what I'm doing. was the right acronym. So they started Internet Business Systems. So I was a kid at the time, and basically since that point, and even before that point, my dad worked for Atari, and I had a few early Ataris at home. And while other kids may have been, playing catch with their dad or fixing cars or whatever, I was coding, and I've been coding for a very, very long time. Built websites.
So let's drop a footnote here, because I saw a statistic yesterday that said only half of 1% of the world, the entire world, 7 or 8 billion people, know how to code. Half of 1%. Of course, it's a much larger percent in the U.S., but I think they were saying less than 5% of everyone in the U.S. knows how to code. And you might say probably less than half of that knows how to code well and understands another domain as you do, such as law. Because you could be very smart as a coder, but not really understand a domain very well.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's a pretty rare skill. I think some people act like in the legal profession, there's some folks out there who think everybody needs to learn how to code, and I don't necessarily endorse that view. I think that it's good to specialize. I'm kind of a weird one for trying to go after two specialties, right? But it is still shockingly rare given the way that the world has gone. The real question is, will really advanced artificial intelligence be able to create programs for us before the world catches up, learns how to code?
Well,
it doesn't matter anymore.
People think for sure that's happening, and the recent ruling in the patent office was that a self-created program by some other program could not be claimed to be the author. The machine cannot be claimed to be the author. On the copyright side, it was the gorilla taking his own photograph, could not claim to be the author of the photograph. And what you're getting from that is a view, which has not yet gotten to the U.S. Supreme Court yet, that says it requires a human being to be the author or inventor under Article 1, Section 8. I think they're going to get there. They'll probably take that case eventually.
Yeah,
but
that sounds right to me.
You're at the forefront because you got through Stanford with flying colors. I didn't realize you practiced for a while. I get the sense you started the business right away. You're certainly looking young enough to have done that. And you've been doing it for a
I
while.
appreciate it. Yeah, I've been doing it for about 7 years now. So the whole story there is went through law school. I mean, I've ended up falling in love with the idea of law and policy as early as high school. Even though I was a huge computer nerd, I got dragged in one day to a high school debate meeting and just kind of fell in love with that too. And those were my two interests, like the cool kid in high school who did debate and coding.
Well,
um,
that's a rare combination because
it's a
most
rare combination,
coders are
but
very
I wrote
nerdy.
about cool in quotation marks.
Right.
And yeah. So by the time I was going to law school, I had kind of a love for both, and I went to Stanford in particular because I thought we're better to explore the kind of where law and technology meet than right in Silicon Valley. And I didn't have to go far from home either, which is pretty nice. And I loved law school. I know for a lot of people, it's a really stressful kind of time. And I think for a lot of people, practicing laws is challenging and stressful. And of course, it has had its challenges. So after law school, I got to clerk for a year out in Boston on the First Circuit Court of Appeals.
Okay.
And afterwards, for a short stint, worked at the governor's office of legal counsel for Deval Patrick at the time. Every time I say governor of Massachusetts, they always think Mitt Romney. It was Deval Patrick at the time.
Right.
And
right.
then after that, worked at Ropes and Gray as a litigation associate for a couple of years. And every one of those experiences is just truly fantastic. And I think there are a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, good and bad, I think get scared off from joining a law firm or going into law practice. And I think there's a lot to recommend it. But that's, I left. And the reason I left is because I like this stuff a lot more. I love building. Litigation, there's definitely a lot of fun pieces of it, don't get me wrong. That definitely scratched the itch of the debate side of my brain. And to a sense, you can be extremely creative in your use of precedent, for example, to make a compelling argument. How you pursue what you're doing with the technology you decide to use, the discovery approach you decide to take, all that stuff can be really enriching. But I really, in some ways, maybe I got jealous. My wife was going through business school at the time,
On the
and
East Coast,
I was
on the East Coast, right?
yeah,
Right.
Harvard, exactly.
Okay. Right.
And so, as I was watching the stuff that she was talking about and thinking about the stuff that I was doing, I kept on saying, I want to work on that stuff. And so honestly, I left Ropes and Gray. I gave him my 2 weeks notice, et cetera, without a dime in funding, without a prototype. In fact, they told me very clearly at Ropes and Gray, if you build something here, we'll own it. So I was like, okay, I'm not building anything.
What?
Here's my 2 weeks notice. Yeah.
What? That's so anti-entrepreneurial on their part.
I think honestly that had I been a little more mature and explored it with a few more people, I think that I would have gotten a different response from different folks at the firm. The person I did talk to at the time, I had this really funny, almost hour-long conversation. I think she was the GC, but maybe she was. I'm not sure what her role was. And I was like, well, so what if I played in a band on the weekend with my friends, and we put together like a cover album and we sold it? She's like, yeah, we'd own that. I was like, what
Well,
if?
that's crazy. That's so
what if,
outside the scope of your employment under the work for hire doctrine. That's wacky. We're talking now legal principles,
yeah.
but the part that I don't get is most entrepreneurial law firms would love to have a guy like you do it on the side, maybe even with some support, and just say, just give us a license and let us be the first customer, and we'll feed back lots of ideas because we need to move in this direction. We don't want to own you. We just want to get the benefits of whatever you're going to do.
Well, so like I was saying, had I maybe floated the idea to a few more people, as I was giving my 2 weeks notice, you can kind of make the rounds in these large law firms, saying your goodbyes to the partners you work with, et cetera. And every partner I talked to was like, you could stay here and do this and get a law firm salary, and potentially like do work for us, but also do this on the side.
You can work 80 hours a week, man. We love you.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, in all seriousness, they were a lot more open to it. And in general, I had a great time at Ropes and Gray. And I think, if I could do it all over again, maybe I would take them up on that offer. It seems like a pretty good.
Let me tell you a story here because it's highly relevant and you'll get a kick out of it. So, I grew up in the mainframe days, and I was a mainframe programmer and got a master's degree in computer science before going to law school. Did a lot of big IBM, heavy iron kind of mainframe coding. And when I came to what was then Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick, they were like, people here are smart, but they don't know coding the way you know coding, and they don't know computer systems the way you know computer systems, although Gordy Davidson did, and Gordy's the managing partner there, and I think he's still the managing partner. And Gordy and I did some great work together, and I hope to have him on the show. But let me drop the footnote. I wrote some of the early software that we were playing with about how to dissect and analyze our client base without spending a fortune in any outside servers or outside talent, because typically you'd bring in outside talent. And I remember at the time saying to people, do you actually want this stuff? And they were like, no, you're wasting your time, man. Do whatever you want with that. You can do whatever you want with that. We don't care about that. And I said, the future is going to be analytics about our clients and applying the 80-20 rule. And they were like, man, we make judgments about clients all the time. Of course, like idiots, we passed on taking Apple stock, which would have made us all billionaires. It's another story for another day. But the point is, I remember at the time them saying, you can do whatever you want. Just make sure the brief is filed on time and you get to the courtroom on time and we're fine. And of course, I did all that as well. And I did work the 80-hour work weeks. Felt like, a lot of fun along the way. But interesting story about how times change, because now I do think most law firms are looking to have a sidecar of some operation like yours, although you've built it into a self-sustaining business.
Yeah.
On your own with very little venture money, is my recollection. You kind of
we ended up raising quite a bit, actually, over the years. It's been 7 years now. We've raised almost $30 to $40 million in that kind of range.
Okay.
So it took some doing. The reason is it's what Casetext does essentially, right? It's, including with its new product Compose, is we help take certain really difficult processes that vex litigators, like that vexed me when I litigated, like legal research, like creating a first draft of a brief, compiling all the legal standards, finding relevant precedent to support a legal proposition. And we try to apply the best technology to make it either automated or to really help put the lawyer in a position to find what they're looking for, right? And when you think about what that requires behind the scenes, it requires that you have a full legal database of every single case that's ever been published, and not even unpublished cases, all statutes, regulations, all in a digitized format. You need to have some of the best artificial intelligence, natural language processing engineers in the world who are able to parse this billion pages of text and turn it into something that's searchable and usable. And you need to engage with really great product and design people. If you want to do this well, it takes money. And it takes money before you make money in this kind of world. For this kind of product, there are a lot of products that you could just do, like a dating website's a great example of website where it's just the technology. You get people involved. You find a way to get people to get involved and included, and then you're off to the races. So in some ways, I wish I could be in a business that has that kind of possibility. But for us, it takes money to operate the business, and took the investors. Yeah, there it is.
I'm going to put it up. I'm going to put it up on the screen, because a lot of times people don't know. They hear Casetext and they've got to see that you've really got something revolutionary. And I was one of your earliest users, I think.
That's right.
I think I was. And I said,
we have user IDs, and I think you're in the first few hundred.
Yes.
And to give you a sense, we're in the millionth now of people who've signed up for at least a free account.
Right. And I remember thinking at the time, if they can pull this off, they are really going to have a Lexis and Westlaw salivating, because those are the two ginormous incumbents. And of course, you're doing it really in a way that's far more advanced and at a far lower price.
That's right.
Of course, when you talk to what I'll call the old guard, and the old guard are not that really old, but their view is, hey, I'm used to Lexis, I'm used to Westlaw, why should I change? And you say, well, this is going to make you so much more efficient and so much more effective. And they're like, yeah, I'm just used to the old way. And it reminded me of back in the days of the yellow pad, when there were people that were saying, I'm not putting a laptop or a desktop on my desk. I've got a secretary, I've got a typing pool. I don't need to do that stuff. And you're doing something pretty amazing here. And I think that people need to really hear the rest of the story, because you're actually getting into the area of writing or starting to write some briefs as well. And I've seen that too. So tell us about how this all evolved, because you've done a lot in actually very little venture money. As I think about it, I know you think it's big, but I'm used to deals where people are taking, 100, 200 million of venture money, and they just say, yeah, that's not enough to do what we want to do. We really need like $500 million. and you look
Oh
at
yeah.
it and say, man, that's a lot of dough, right?
My wife is in the she's a vice president at a startup where they raised over, or they've raised tens of millions, not like hundreds of millions, whatever, but they're involved in creating satellites.
Yes.
And one of their competitors, or just people in the same field, I'm not sure if they're quite a competitor, is this satellite company called OneWeb. And they, I think, raised in the billions of dollars, like $4 billion, and just declared bankruptcy.
Right.
And so it's like, what we can do with legal technology if we had $4 billion, let me tell you.
Well, sometimes it's a curse to be truthful, because small is beautiful. And if you keep a team really tight, you can
Yes.
get so much more work done with a team of 3 or 4, or sometimes even 2, than you can do with a team of 50 to 100. I mean, you'd be amazed that, that sort of mythical Man Month book from many, many years ago, decades ago now, it's really true. You cannot accelerate good coding in ways that don't cause other consequences. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So,
absolutely
so,
correct.
so you get the idea that this could be a lot better. I guess you got it on your own time, and you tried to persuade your old law firm to sort of do the right thing. They were stuck in their ways, and they lost some good talent as a result. And you moved back to the West Coast, right?
That's right.
Your
That's
wife
right.
must have graduated from Harvard and said, "Yeah, let's go back home," right?
Yeah, that's right. We lived in California our entire lives. We met in high school. We lived in California our entire lives, and we really enjoyed the experience of being in Boston. But at the end of it, we were done.
Right.
It is,
Cold winters.
cold
Cold
winters.
winters.
We also missed family and friends and so on. So it was time to move back.
My
And
greatest story about working at Davis Stafford was, we had this case. You may remember these companies. VisiCorp was the original electronic spreadsheet, VisiCalc.
mm-hmm,
It was in
mm-hmm.
major litigation with Software Arts, the two guys, Bricklin and Frankston. They're still alive. Those guys are still alive. I got to get them on the show. Major lawsuit, big fight between those two companies. Dan Faustra is still alive too. He's got his own little company as well. He was the CEO of VisiCorp. And it was all about the VisiCalc spreadsheet, and I won't go into all the detailed issues, but I remember living in Boston for a while out of a very famous hotel. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It'll come to me in a second. But I remember walking to the courthouse in the winter in like standard West Coast shoes, not boots, not anything. And the snow got into my shoes so badly that I remember the judge's clerk looking at the puddle that I left in the courtroom with the snow kind of melting off my shoes, and said, "Why don't you just get yourself a set of boots, man? If you're going to live in Boston, act like a Bostonian." It was
Oh
a
yeah.
pretty funny remark at the time, and it'll always remain with me. It was a Judge Toro. He might even still be alive, but if he is, he must be close to 100. But he was an interesting judge and had some very interesting remarks about lawyers and about that case. I'm sure if we searched on your
dude.
I'm sure
Yeah.
if we searched on your system, you'd find some of his opinions in that case and several others, which would be interesting.
His name came up a lot when I was researching stuff on the First Circuit.
Right, because
Yeah.
he was the chief judge, I think, in the district court for a while, and he had very
Mm-hmm.
strong views about just about everything. But let me ask you, did you start to sort of do the coding on your own, or did you have some help at the very, very beginning? Tell us about that story.
So at the very beginning, me and a friend began the business, and we applied for this this organization called Y Combinator.
Right.
And Y Combinator, for those who don't know, is this kind of startup incubator that gives you a tiny bit of money and 3 months to get a product off the ground, and some initial usage, et cetera. And if you do a good job, then you get, at the end of the summer that we did it for 3 months, you get in front of a room of about 600 investors, big and small, and you have 2.5 minutes to present. And as the person who founded Y Combinator would say, during the summer, it's the most highly leveraged time of your life.
Right.
Because everything you do up before the 2.5 minutes and including that 2.5 minutes will determine, in many ways, the early fate of your business. Right. So you get up on stage, it's terrifying. So during those 2.5 months, very beginning of the days, I coded everything, essentially.
Okay.
And it was really a real slog, like a real but it's fun too. But it's one of those things where the early vision for Casetext, this isn't that far from where we are today, is the big question was, how can we find a way to create something that is as good, if not dramatically better than Westlaw and LexisNexis, but do it smarter, so that we don't have to, for example, have thousands and thousands of editors who drive up the cost of the system,
Right.
hence making it extremely expensive for the end user. What if we can find a way to do it smarter internally and provide, on the one hand, a less expensive service, and on the other hand, apply groundbreaking technologies to make the research experience better. And at the end of the day, what you have is something that is less expensive, but easier and better to use, a winning combination, right?
Right. And you could say your advantage in part was you're kind of doing something that would require West or LexisNexis to kind of tear up their big mainframe system and just start from scratch with the view that, hey, we've got to make this so easy, so simple, and so automated that people salivate to do the research. They enjoy it. They don't dread it, right?
And they would also have to forego their current way of doing business, which literally includes thousands or tens of thousands of human attorney editors doing manual tasks.
Right.
They have to change a lot about their business in order to compete with our price point.
Right.
So both from a usability perspective and from a price point perspective, the original vision was and still is to put people who use this kind of software, who use legal research software, at a substantial advantage if they chose to work with us.
Right.
And what I underestimated at the beginning of the day was how much work goes into making a basic legal research tool, right? Even a basic legal research tool, search, and getting a search engine set up and making that work.
Right.
Getting all the things into a database, getting to load super fast. We had to make some really early architectural decisions that, thankfully, we hired some really amazing engineers who are much better than I am, and all of those have been thrown out. but struggling with that first summer was really a formative experience. And over time, like exactly how we delivered on our value and exactly how things got built out definitely evolved. I think that's true of every startup. We ended up with, years later, and going to about a year ago, is a legal research platform like with as planned, dramatically more affordable, but still profitable for us because we're doing things in a smarter way.
Right.
And the technology is like the one that you're just scrolling past, called Care AI, which lets attorneys do things that you can never do on things like Westlaw and LexisNexis, like simply drag and drop a brief or a complaint, or any other a Wall Street Journal article, a patent, honestly, pull that into the research system. It uses the most advanced natural language processing technology that we're aware of to get at the guts of what's going on in that document, and uses that to help find really relevant case law. So if you're responding to a motion to dismiss, for example, and you're writing the opposition, it will help you find the next 3 or 4 cases you should be writing. If you're responding to a complaint, to write a motion to dismiss. If you are just doing some research to figure out what's going on with an emerging issue, emerging area, there's a lot more that you can give a search system like ours, because you can upload whole documents. You can ever cram into a word query. So you're not just getting a less expensive West or LexisNexis replacement. And over 6,000 firms at this point have switched from West and Lexis to us.
Well, probably have they switched, or are they sort of using you in combo with those other systems?
We're seeing both. Traditionally, firms that are very well resourced and want to have the best of both worlds, so to speak, invest in both. And so around 50 of our firms are in the AmLaw 200, actually mostly AmLaw 100. And those firms, the way they perceive things, I think this is correct for them, is we want to get every advantage in winning. And the cost of software, when you look at it in the big picture, is trivial. Yeah, even though it's great for us, it's trivial, right? So they're gonna, if they see that we have a unique advantage, for example, through Care AI, they're gonna invest in it.
Yeah, people should know you call it Cara, C-A-R-A, not Alexa, not all these other names that are out there. Although I guess it'll eventually have a voice recognition aspect to it.
Possibly, yeah.
But if you think about it, what people don't understand is when you drag and drop something into that box, you are generating a much more powerful index or indexing tool than you could ever type into a Google screen. And most people don't believe that. They don't understand that. they get worried that, well, if I drag a draft of whatever I'm doing, it's going to become public. And I know you assure that's not the case, but people get nervous about that. I mean, I've heard every single objection. I could be your best VP of sales. I've literally heard every objection. And I always say, you're going to publish this stuff on Pacer or wherever it's going to go in a courthouse. What are you worried about? It's getting filed like that night at 11:59 p.m. and people are working on the brief at 4 p.m. and they're worried, well, there might be an 8-hour
Well, it's not
difference.
just that. I mean, we take those kind of security concerns really seriously. The other aspect of it too that's really important is we don't store the brief.
Right.
It is there's a process that runs on it that extracts information.
Yeah.
But the extracting information is in a machine language that would be totally not understandable by any
encrypted.
human.
It's
encrypted.
effectively encrypted. Yeah.
Exactly. It's both effectively encrypted and encrypted. And then after that, it's deleted permanently. In fact, it never even leaves RAM.
Yes.
Right. So if a really malicious actor were to unplug the machine and try to write it off the disk, they wouldn't be able to. It'd be vanish immediately from the random access memory.
Right.
So and that's one of the reasons why a lot of the largest firms feel very comfortable working with us, is because besides the points you're making are totally correct, but even a step beyond, we kind of gone above and beyond to make sure that we just don't hold on to, you know. But the
I know you're
in the transition, actually, we just last February, this is February 25th, right before this whole everything kind of blew up at the pandemic, we launched a new product called Compose. The reason is that we saw a lot of people doing research on our system. We asked, like, well, what do you, it's funny, I have to update that number.
I know. See, you get an extra benefit out of doing this. Everything goes in sharper focus now. The number is 6,000, right? The number is 4,500 to 6,000, right?
Yeah, we're growing pretty quickly, so we have to kind of keep on updating our marketing.
The other thing I would tell you on the website, just while we're at it, so you get some real value out of this. I don't think you want just one solo practitioner's testimonial in it. I mean, you could put me on there, which is more than a solo. But having one guy, and I'm sure you know James, and I'm sure he was an early person, but if you put my name on there with Computer Log Group, people would really get the message. I'm not pitching for that, but you could put a bunch of different names on there, and I know there are some significant people, including some significant appellate lawyers, I'm one of them, that use your system. And I have been playing with your Compose beta version, I guess, and I've given some feedback about where I think it should go, and I know you guys take feedback pretty seriously.
Oh yeah. I mean, and to talk about that for a second, that's what I'll be talking about with the firm in just about 5 minutes. The idea there is we saw a lot of people doing legal research. What are they doing legal research for, right? And what were the end outcomes? Like 9 times out of 10, it's to write a substantive brief or a memo.
Right.
And so we said, okay, well, what if we can help? What if instead of doing keyword searches, like what is the standard for X, Y, and Z law, or can I get in my circuit or my district court the 3-part test for this? We have a totally new interface. The way it works is you just say, I'm working on this kind of motion in this district court or in this state court. I'm on this side, and based on that very basic information, it gives you a list, an organized list of all the arguments you can possibly make while you're making that brief. And clicking on one of those arguments brings in not just the sample language for the argument you can make, to start off the brief, which is obviously totally editable by you, but also all of the legal standards, the 3-part tests, the burdens on one side or the other, all of that stuff that one might use to further an argument.
Right.
And
this is called Compose, right? This is your new faster way of doing briefing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's evolved a lot even since you've seen it. But I recommend anybody who wants to give it a shot, you can start one just for free today. So this is really fun, though.
We'll wrap up, but let me just ask you, in general, isn't the big sort of holy grail to get into the various law schools and get them to sort of act as the first movers for all these new lawyers coming out?
And we actually, for years now, built a student ambassador program that we're really proud of, and it's put us in a position, exactly as you say, to start with that group of people. And that's just been wonderful.
So maybe what I could do is play with your Compose, and we can do a part 2 to this where I give you some feedback about what I think is going to happen or not happen here. You're off to the races as it is. Is the plan to actually go public and be a ginormous company
I mean, eventually, potentially, the plan is just to build a great business, and whatever outcome any entrepreneur could ever want comes out of that, and that's the only focus. We don't think about exit. We don't think about going public. We don't think about being acquired. We just think about how do we build something that's really useful to a lot of people. And once you get that, and you figure out the business behind it, everything else tends to take care of itself.
Well, big applause to you and your team, Jake. You're doing great work. I'll look forward to doing this again, maybe in the coming months when I get to play with Compose and tell you what I think of it, part 2. I've already told you about part 1, but that was a while ago, and hopefully I'm going to see some of my ideas in it.
I think you will.
Yeah. Okay, see you later. Have a good time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.